Welcome back. Now that we have our line being drawn between these two spheres, I want to add a text box on the screen to be positioned halfway along, which has the distance between these two spheres in here, or essentially what the length of that line is if it were in 3D. Okay, so let's now add into our hierarchy the text box that will take this. So we're going to go UI, and I'm going to add in a text mesh pro text. Now it's going to pop up and ask me to import some extra things for it, which I can't do in play mode, so let's just stop that. Okay, let's go ahead and add in that text mesh pro element again. So here's our new text down here. Let's call this distance, and we want that distance to be positioned over here with the distance shown in the text box. All right, so we're going to go back into Muse chat. Now I'm going to continue from where I left off with my code because I kind of want to use the on post render method to position the text box halfway along that line. So that will be the first thing that we do, is positioning it. Okay, so let's ask Muse. I have a text box that I would like to position halfway along the line. Can you update the class to perform this task? Okay, so it's coming back with the updated code. Now it's taking the text box through here from our UI. Now I'm using a text mesh pro, so I'm going to have to ask it to update this when it's finished it. Okay, update the code to use a text mesh pro text. Okay, so it's coming back in. Let's see, as it generates this code, it's created a position text box method I saw just there. So now it's finished. Let's scroll up and we will grab hold of that. You can see that we're passing through a text mesh pro text box just here. Let's go back into our script, select it all and paste this in. Okay, and then we'll just hit save. Go back into Unity. I'm going to find my script that's on the camera and then grab hold of my text box, which is distance, and drag and drop it down into the line drawer. Okay, so let's press play and see where our text box gets placed. Okay, so let's move this around and see if it moves. Yes, it does. Now it doesn't look like it's centered, and that's because of the size of the text box and the alignment of the text box. If we in play mode click to find our text box and go like this, you'll see that there it is there. It's not center aligned, and depending on its actual pivot point, it might not be centered on the center point of where it thinks it's putting it here either. Okay, so what I'm going to do is stop playing, and I'm going to grab my text box, double click if I can see it in the scene there. Now first things first is we can make this a little bit easier if we center our text. So let's come down into the settings and alignment for our text box and just click on center and center like that so that it's centered. Right, so now what we want to do is actually center where this gets put around the central pivot point just in here. Okay, so let's ask Muse to update the code to do that. So let's down the bottom and we'll put in update the code to position the text around its center. Now, better spell that in American center, though I don't think it will make much of a difference. And let's see what the code looks like from here. Right, so now what the code has done is updated the position text box method, because it's the bit that's centering it, and you can see that it's set the pivot to the center of the text box and then align it to the center. It's also doing the text box alignment for the text options to center, which is what we just did by hand before. So let's just grab hold of this position text box, because we only need that part of the script. And we'll go back in here and just update this method like that. Then we'll just hit save. Let's go back into Unity and press play to see the alignment. Okay, let's go. Right, so there it is, aligned around the center, or is it? It doesn't look particularly aligned. It still looks like it's aligned just there rather than central to this. Okay, so let's just tell Muse about that. And we're going to say the text doesn't appear to be centered and is offset to the left. Alright, so it's come back saying that we need to update some pivot points and some anchor values that are in there, and it's put them in this position text box. So we'll use that again. Of course, constantly setting the pivot point and the min and max anchors of the text box, and also the alignment isn't necessary in code each kind of update, so it's something you could do by hand before the fact, but we're just following what Muse is giving us. So let's now put that in there. Let's save it, and we'll go back into Unity and we'll press play. And it still appears to be aligned to the left. Okay, so what could be going wrong here? Because we're centering it, and we've got a centered pivot point, and we've got all those sorts of things. Let's just have a quick look at the code ourselves. And if we come down into the position text box here, you'll see that the midpoint that's being calculated as to where to actually put the box is the midpoint between the 3D positions of those two spheres. Now this is going to give us something that looks a little bit skewed if one of the positions is further back than the other. Then the midpoint, when it gets to the screen through this here, is going to look a little bit sort of slightly off to the center. Instead, what you want to do is find the midpoint between the screen positions for both of those. So it's a slightly different calculation, still finding the halfway point. Let's ask Muse how we actually achieve that. So coming back into here, we'll go into Muse, and down the bottom we'll say that this midpoint is being calculated between the 3D positions of the game objects. I would like to calculate the midpoint using the screen positions instead. Okay, so let's see how it now updates the code. Now, I'm not saying that what we've already done is wrong, because we still had to make sure that we center aligned the text in the text box and all of those other sorts of things. But now we're going to change this, and you can see in this code on my screen that it's now doing the conversion between those world positions to screen positions, and then finding the halfway between those. So if we just come up a little bit, you'll see that code going on just in here. Again, it's just our position text box method that we need to get, so we can just copy that. We're going to come across into the project. Let me stop playing and go into this code, put that code in there instead. Okay, now we'll save that, go back into Unity. You'll notice that my text box has actually moved on the screen from where it was before we pressed play earlier on. That's because I actually moved it off camera. So if I just move it somewhere else so that you can actually see that it does move. So when we press play, we will now hopefully get that text box right in the middle, which it is. Okay, so there we have it. That process just then involved a little bit of intuition on our own cases, so we still needed to think through. We could have kept telling Muse it was wrong, but the AI doesn't necessarily know what about it is wrong or would come up with the correct solution like I just reasoned it through myself. So just be aware that when you're using this, you will have to have a little bit of understanding of what you're trying to achieve, at least kind of theoretically, so that you can get it to work. Otherwise, it's going to get extremely frustrating. One final thing we're going to do with this project is to display the distance between those spheres in that text box, and we'll come back and do that in the next lecture.